son Kobe, Yaakov David Zichron Levracha ben Yosef Tzadok. We thank our Talmud Torah sponsor for the month of Sivan, Alan and Sue Meirowitz and family, Jason, Deborah, Justin, Rebecca, Mindy, and Simcha, and all of the grandchildren in the Zechus of Refuah Shalema for Sue, for Shulamis Tova, Bas Mindel. We hope that in the merit of all of our Talmud Torah, she will have a complete and enduring refuah. We thank our DAF sponsors. We thank our DAF sponsors, Maish and Devorah Wordesheim, in memory of Devorah's mother, Leah Bas Bernhardt, and we thank our DAF sponsors, Gavi and Sheena Cohn, for dedicating the shir this morning in memory of Gavi's grandfather, Mr. Meir Axman. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah and the families a nechama. And Abose, with that, let us begin. So today's DAF is Ayin Tes 79, and we are picking up on the top of Ayin Tes, actually about 2, 4, 6 lines down from the top on Ayin Tes Amud Aleph. So both say also a thank you to Rabbi Yehuda Neuberger for giving the shir last night, long daf, extensive shir. We thank him very much for the preparation, for the beautiful insights. And also with that, let us begin. So we're continuing with the Mishnah, and the topic over here being how much of a particular item does one have to carry out in order to be chayav for hotzah. So remember again, we've already seen this yesod that hotzah, one is only chayiv for transporting an item if one transports a unit of chashivos, a unit of importance. So obviously, depending on the item, will determine its chashivos, will determine its size of chashivos. So it says or, for example, again, if one goes in and carries out leather, or is a hide or leather, kedei la'asos kamiyah. So the Mishnah said, you have to carry out enough leather in order to go ahead and make an amulet. So says the Gemara, Rav Nachman. So Rava asked Rav Nachman, Hamotzi or bekamo. If one goes in and carries out leather, how much hide is one chayiv for carrying out? Amar leikidisnan. But we learned in the Mishnah, or kedei la'asos kamiyah. You have to carry out enough leather in order to be able to make an amulet. So an amulet's worth leather, that's the amount that you are chayiv for carrying out. La'avdo bekamo. How much do you have to carry out? If, let's say, again, the leather is going to be tanned, how much do you have to carry out? Amar le loshna. Siba say the assumption is that halacha lemaisa, an amulet is written on tanned leather. So what happens if a person is going to go ahead and, Rashi says, la'aved, or la'avad, or ha'omid la'abdo, va'adayin la'avdo, become a shira hotzaso. So we're assuming that when the Mishnah talks about the amount of leather necessary to go ahead and make an amulet on, that is already leather that has been tanned, already leather that has been processed. So now that's the amount, processed leather, so tanned leather, the amount to write an amulet. What happens if halacha lamaisa, one is carrying or one has unprocessed or untanned leather? How much does one have to carry out on Shabbos in order to be chayiv? Amar le loshna. He said there's no difference. In other words, there's no distinction between tanned leather, untanned leather. The amount is the same. Enough to write on it a kamiyah, an amulet. And again, how do you know, ultimately again, that there's no distinction between tanned leather and untanned leather? Kidisnan, hamalabein v'hamenafetz v'hatzovea v'hatava shi'uro kimali rochav hasit kafel. So we'll say again. Now the Mishnah is talking about over here in terms of wool. So remember again, melavin is one who's whitening or cleaning wool. Menafetz, combing, sovea, dyeing, tava, weaving. So the amount of wool that one is chayiv for carrying out is kimali rochav hasit kafel. So Rashi says sit kedei hefresh etzba v'ama. So sit is the amount of distance between two fingers. So if you go ahead and you carry out the amount of wool as the distance between two fingers, ultimately you're chayiv. Now what's interesting about this statement, even though we're not talking about wool, what's interesting about this is no matter what stage of processing the wool is in, so whether ultimately, again, you're up to the stage of processing, of whitening it, or of combing it, apparently, again, the stage of processing has no impact on the amount of wool for which you are chayiv for carrying it out. In other words, the amount is the same independent of the processing stage that you are up to. V'ha'oreg beis chutin, but if one goes ahead and weaves two threads, Shiuro kimali rochav hasit kafel. Ultimately, again, the sheer same idea is the amount of the double the double the amount of the space between fingers. Alma, the Rebbe is saying. Now the point is, for our purposes, what do you see from this? Alma kevon de latvia kai shiuro kitavui. What you see from here is that since the wool is going to be usable for spinning, for threading, for spinning it into wool. Therefore, again, it has the same shear as wool that is already spun. So we'll say, just to understand what's happening over here. What we're showing is that wool that is in the process of being refined has the same shear for hotza'ah as wool that has already been processed. So you see that materials that are in the process of being processed have the same shear as the fully processed material. Therefore, back to our leather discussion. Hachanami kevan de la abdo kai shiur kimu'ubad. Therefore, again, same thing by leather. Since leather is in the process of ultimately being tanned, or it's all made, it's ready to be tanned, it has the same shear as leather that is already tanned. V'shalo la'abdo bikamo. And I will say, so again, so now what we've established according to the Gemara is whether the leather is actually tanned or whether it is going to be tanned, it has the same shear. The shear for that leather is the amount to write a kamiyah. I v'shalo la'abdo bikamo. What happens if you have leather that's never going to be tanned? Right? That's not the intent, that's not the use of the leather. So what's its shear? Amrle loshna. He says still there's no distinction. Apparently what the Gemara is suggesting over here is that the shear for leather is going to be the amount of a kamiyah, whether the leather ultimately again is tanned, is going to be tanned, or apparently even if it's never going to be tanned. So the Gemara says, is that true? Are you literally telling me? So I say, I could understand if you want to tell me that halacha l'maisa, the shear for leather that is tanned and leather that is going to be tanned is the same. I could wrap my head around that. But now what the Gemara is actually suggesting is that the shear is going to be the same for leather that is tanned, will be tanned, and will never be tanned. So is that true? The Gemara says, can you really make that? Can you really say that all of those leathers have the same shear? V'lo shani bein mu'ubad l'shein mu'ubad isvei reiz kasha hamotzi samalim shiruyim kedei litzboa bahen dugma li'ira. So we'll say if one goes ahead and takes out samanim are spices or herbs, shiruyim that have been soaked. Now we'll say if you look at Rashi for just a moment, so Rashi says over here, actually not yet. So if one takes out samanim, so herbs that have already been soaked, so how many of the herbs do you have to carry, or how much of the herbs do you have to carry out in order to be chayiv? Kadeletz ba bahen dugma, enough to go ahead and dye a sample patch. If you look at Rashi, dugma, kilomer ma'at ke'in shemar l'dugma, lo marot za'ata bazeh. So we'll say, so for example, let's say somebody normally sold dyes. So what you would do is, in order to go ahead and sell your wares, you would dye patches of material as examples, as what's the right word? Samples, as samples of the dye. So how much of a dye, how much of the herbs are you chayiv for carrying out on Shabbos? If you carry out enough soaked herbs to be able to make a sample patch, that's what you're chayiv for. The Gemara says, li'ira. Ultimately, again, the Gemara just gives, Rashi says, li'ira is v'hu k'shir tzarach li'ira shel gardi listom pikana shepakis ha'arav nesunaba. This also happens to be enough to go ahead and put in the top of the weaver's bobbin, which is a part of the loom that controls the warp thread. Rabbi said, yet we see, interestingly enough, by herbs that are not soaked, by herbs that are not soaked, what's the halacha? Tanan, klipe agozim v'klipe rimonim, sotis upua, kadei litzboa bohen beged katan lefi savka. Yet I will say, interestingly enough, when it comes to herbs that are not soaked, we learn that that if you have the shells of agozim, shells of nuts, or shells of rimonim, of pomegranates, or satis upua, these are different types of herbs, what's the halacha? You have to carry out enough to go ahead and color the small beged that a woman wears on the top of her hat. So we'll say, so what do you see from here? You see from here that halacha l'maisa, there's a different shear, there's a different amount for herbs before they're soaked and herbs after they're soaked. So we'll say if this is true by herbs, then bepashtos again, why would it not apply by leather as well? Second line of Osa Ayin Tesamud Aleph, second wide line, excuse me. Lefi Shein Adam Torech Lishros Samanim Litzbos Bahem Dugma Liira. Because we'll say ultimately again it's very simple. Because halacha lemaisa, a person is not going to go ahead. If a person is going to soak herbs, apparently again soaking herbs is a process, it's an avoda, and a person is only going to do that if they have a significant amount of material to dye. But if they have a relatively small amount of material, just like the little bit of material that a woman wears on top of her hat, so a person is not going to dye a batch of herbs for something so small. I v'hari zar onigina. But yet Rabbi again, what about zar onigina? Literally means seeds, garden seeds. Before you plant them, Tinan, we learned zar onegina pachos mikrogeres. So we'll say halacha l'maisa. If you carry out garden seeds on Shabbos, halacha l'maisa, even if you carry out less than a grogeres, less than the volume of a dried fig, you're going to be chayiv. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer chamisha. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira says no, you have to carry out at least 5 seeds. Now that's all before the seeds are planted. Vilu basar dizarinu. Yet interestingly enough, after they've been planted, Tinan zevel v'chol hadak. If you take out zevel, literally is manure or compost, fertilizer. Chol hadak, fine sand. Kadei lezabel bo kalach shel kruv. Even if you carry out just enough to fertilize 1 stalk of cabbage, did Rabbi Akiva, enough to go ahead and fertilize a leek. So we'll say again. So you see from here that there's a distinction between things before they're planted and after they're planted. Again, this is before it's planted, and this is when it's not been planted. Because the general will say a person is not going to go ahead and carry out 1 seed in order to plant it. So Rabbi will say what we're beginning to see is as follows: that halacha l'maisa, here, just to understand the context, what the Gemara essentially said is that when it comes to a hide, when it comes to leather, so what the Gemara is suggesting is that the shear for leather is going to be the same, whether the leather is tanned, is not tanned, and is apparently even if the leather is not going to be tanned. Yet the Gemara contrasts that with other items where you see halacha l'maisa that the shear for importance changes ultimately again depending on the state of the individual, so of the entity. So the seeds before they're planted will have 1 shear versus the seeds after they're planted will have another shear. The herbs that are soaked will have 1 shear before they're soaked, 1 shear after they're soaked. And I will say all the Gemara is essentially saying is that halacha l'maisa in these situations, there's not really one principle across the board, because halacha l'maisa, all of this is driven by chashivos. What creates a unit of chashivos for the item? What about mortar? Before it's needed, legable means it's needed. In other words, before it's made into mortar, Tanya, we learned, modim chacham Rabbi Shimon, b'motzif shofchen l'rishus harabim, shishiuram b'revius. Right, the Chachamim agree with Rabbi Shimon that halacha l'maisa, if one brings out shofchen, Rabbi says shofchen literally is wastewater. If one brings out wastewater into the Rishus Harabim, that the halacha is a revius. V'avinaban, we ask wastewater shofchen l'may chazi, what is wastewater usable for? On Rabbi Yirmiyah legabel bahenes hatit. Ultimately, again, wastewater could be used to go ahead and create tit, to create mortar. Vilu basar de gavle, and yet interestingly enough, after it's needed, in other words, after you make the mortar, what's the halacha? Tanyo, tit kedei legabel bahen pikur. You're chayiv if you carry out enough of the mortar in order to make a pikur. So we saw this in yesterday's daf already. Pikur, remember again, represents the utensil that you would use to go ahead and house molten metal. So the pikur is the opening, which is a very small amount. Hasanami kida amron lefishin adam torech b'ayim legabel lesatit lasos bo pikar. The most, it's as we said before, because halacha l'maisa, if a person's going to make mortar, he's not just going to make enough mortar to go ahead and make the pikor. Rather, if he's going to make mortar, he's going to make a larger amount. Tashma We'll see here the Gemara says there are three different types of hide. So it's just very interesting. It's actually going to lead into our next discussion as well. Three different types of hide. What are the three different types of hide? Matzah, the chipa, the diftera. These are the names. Matzah, chipa, and diftera. Matzah kimashma'o. So I'll say a matzah hide is just as it sounds. Delo maliach, udelo kamiach, udelo afetz. But this is very interesting. So matzah hide, just like matzah, essentially has no additives. So a matzah hide has no additives as well. In other words, there's nothing really done in the processing of such a hide, right? It's not salted, right? It's not salted. It's not treated with flour, and it's not treated with gall nut juice. Interestingly enough, as you're going to see, so hides were processed in different ways. So a matzah hide was essentially an unprocessed hide, not salted, not treated with flour, and not treated with gall nut juice. The kamashiro, and we'll say how much on Shabbos, what's the shear, how much, if you carry this type of matzah hide, how much are you chayiv for? Or let me say differently, how much of this type of hide do you have to carry in order to be chayiv on Shabbos? Tani Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda, kedei latzur bo mishkalos kitana, enough to go ahead and wrap a small weight. Vikama, and how much is such a weight? Amrabaye, riva de pumpadisa. It's a quarter of a litra, right? A quarter of a litra of a pumpadisa weight. If you look at Rashi, this is Rashi in the widest lines. It's about 6 lines from the bottom. Riva de pumpadisa. Rova litra shel pumpadisa. Derech hasosum latra mishkalo shal feres. Kadesh lo tifchas. Lefi shamshachas shamateches nishchakes tamid. V'nifchas melis. This is actually very interesting. So apparently what they used to do is as follows. They would go ahead and they would have these weights. So let's say in this case we're talking about, again, a quarter of a litra. This was the unit of a weight. Now what they would do is, because these weights were made of softer type metals, so the concern was that over time the amount of metal would diminish. Every time you put it on the scale, because it bangs against the scale, the metal would diminish. So what they used to do is they would wrap the weight in a little bit of parchment and a little bit of hide in order to prevent the metal itself from eroding. So the Gemara says, this matzah hide, how much matzah hide are you chayiv for going ahead and carrying on Shabbos? Enough hide to be able to wrap the quarter of the litra of the pumpadisa weight in it. That's the shear. Okay, next. Chipa. So we'll say, what's a chipa hide? Chipa hide is dimaliach velo kamiach velo afetz. So a chipa hide was salted, but it was not treated with flour and not treated with gall nut juice. Okay, and how much are you chayiv? Kamishiro kidisnan or kedei la'asos kamia. So we'll say, interestingly enough, that's where again chipa is already when it's called, or it's already called the hide, and you're chayiv if you carry out the amount that it takes, the amount necessary to write an amulet, to write the kamia on it. Diftera. We'll say, what's diftera? What's diftera parchment? Diftera is dimaliach, vikamiach, velo afetz. It is treated with salt, it's treated with flour, but it is not treated with gall nut juice. The kamashiuro. And how much is the shear of this item? How much is the shear of diftera? Kadei lichtov alav as haget. Ultimately, again, enough to write a get. So a large enough piece of diftera parchment to be able to write a get. Good. So we'll say, what do you see from here? Katani mihas kadei latzor bo mishkalos kitana. That was, and I look at Rashi for just a moment. Katani mihas al mashir de'in mu'ubad nafish. So we'll say, what I want to point out is something very interesting. So let's go back for just a moment. The most unprocessed form of parchment or of hide that the Gemara discussed was matzah, right? It was matzah. That's unprocessed hide. Right? It's not treated, ultimately, again, it's not treated with salt, not with flour, not with gall nut juice. And yet, what did the Gemara say the shear was? The shear for that amount was enough to go ahead and wrap the quarter litra weight. Now, the Gemara says, just want to point out, ultimately, again, that is a larger amount than the amount to go ahead and write an amulet. So what do you see from here? You see from here that untanned hide does have a larger shear than a tanned hide. In other words, we'll say, We were trying to say, we're kind of looping back all the way now. We were saying before, the Gemara wanted to suggest that halacha lamaisa, whether the hide is tanned or untanned, the shear is the same, lasos kamiyah. From here we see that that is not the fact. From here we see that the Gemara is giving a shear that ultimately, again, enough to go ahead and wrap the weight. That's different than the shear to write the kamiyah, to which the Gemara says, what do you see from here? Katani mihas. Katani mihas kedei lasad ba mashkolas kitana. To which the Gemara says that case is different. Why? That's talking about a moist hide. Take a look at Rashi bibishula. Lach kemosha hofshat kari bishula. We'll say when the hide is still moist, when it is first removed from the animal, that is called bishula. That is called bishul. It's called moist. Therefore, again, shulach dakanti lo chazi liibud aval yavesh chazi liibud v'chiven dechazi liibud havikim ubad. So, now the Gemara is making a distinction. You're right. Before the hide is dried out, then enachinami, it has a different kind of shear, right? That's called bishula. When the hide is still moist, it has a different kind of shear. Once the hide dries out, then it has one shear. The shear from the time that it dries out, it doesn't matter again what stage of processing it is in subsequently. Once it dries out, the shear for the hide will be the amount to write a kamiyah. So we'll say, again, according to where the Gemara is holding right now is, there are two shiurim for a hide for Otzah on Shabbos. When it's moist, in other words, before it's dried out, so apparently, again, the shear will be the amount necessary to wrap a quarter litra weight. Once it is dried out, there is one shear, one amount for Otzah for a hide of Shabbos, and that is the amount halacha lamaisa to go ahead and write the kamiyah. I have a hatana, but we learned beged shlosha shlosha. So we'll say now again by the halachos of tuma. We've seen this before, right? That the shear for a beged is 3 by 3, right? Shlosha shlosha medras. So if the beged is 3 by 3, it allows it to contract tumas medras. Hasak dalad al dalad. Sackcloth is dalad al dalad. These are the amounts of both say. These are the measurements necessary to be able to contract tuma. Ha'or, hey al hey, leather, a hide, is hey al hey. Mapos, vav al vav, a mat, 6 by 6. Bein lemedrish, bein lemes. V'tani Allah, habeged, v'asak, v'ha'or, kishir l'tuma, kach shir l'hotza. And yet, Rabbi we learned also that what? The Brisa says that a beged, a sack, and or, that whether it's a garment, a sackcloth, or leather, a hide, the shear for tuma is the same shear for Shabbos, which I will say obviously is a much larger shear. So you see over here that halacha lamaisa, that the shear is larger, to which the Gemara says, Hu bikur tubla, right? Bikur tubla. What's bikur tubla? Rashi says, mevashlo beroschen. That's talking about the type of hide that has been cooked. If the hide's been cooked, then the only thing it is really usable for is furniture. Rashi says, mevashlo beroschen. Umis kasha leishev alav lechasos tuluvko umitos lasos shulchan. So we'll say, if the hide has been cooked, then the only thing it is usable is for furniture, then it'll have a different shear. So we'll say, bottom line, halacha lemaisa, what comes out of this sugya? Essentially, once the hide has dried out, it has the same shear. Whether that hide is going to be tanned, not going to be tanned, once the hide is quote unquote dried, the shear for hotza'ah on Shabbos is the amount to write a kamiyah. Halacha l'maisa, before the hide has dried out, right? It's still moist. Enachinami, it'll have a different shear. The shear for that is the amount of hide necessary to be able to wrap a quarter litra of the pumpadisin weight. Then you're chayav for that outsah. The only other exception apparently will be if you boil the hide. If you boil the hide, then enachinami, the shear for the hide ultimately again will be dalid al dalid. Good. So those are the three shurim. Dalid al dalid if the hide is boiled, right? Quarter of a litra when the hide is moist. But once the hide has dried out, anything past that, the shear for otzav a hide on Shabbos will be the amount to write a kamiyah. Beautiful. Amud beis. Klaf. Kedei lichtov alav parsha ketana. So what's now interesting sugya? By a klaf. So what's the halacha by klaf? By klaf, you're chayiv if you go ahead and you carry out enough to write a parsha ketana, a small parsha. Now, what I just want to point out is as follows. Remember again, the Mishnah over here on the Gemara that we quoted before spoke about different types of parchment, right? We saw matzah, chifa, Where was it? Matzah, chifa, and diftera. So just want to point out that klaf is actually, again, we're going to see the highest level of processing of parchment that you could have. So klaf kedei lichtov ala parsha ketana. So for klaf you're chayiv if you go in and you carry out enough to write a small parsha. Says the Gemara or Minhu Reza Kasha klaf v'duch sustos kedei lichtov alav mezuzah. Yet I will say the Raisa says that klaf and duchsustos. Now I will say what's duchsustos? Rashi says type Rashi Amud Beis klaf shenitla klipaso ha'alyona. We'll say duchsustos means a klaf where you have removed the upper level. So apparently, again, klaf is a piece of parchment, right? Duchsustos is you've removed a layer of the klaf. So the halacha is for klaf and duchsustos, if you carry them out on Shabbos, you are chayiv if you go ahead and you carry out enough to write a mezuzah. Says the Gemara, my mezuzah. What does mezuzah mean? Mezuzah shebetfilin. So it's actually, we'll say, it's not mezuzah like you think about, like you put on your wall, but like you put on your doorway. Rather, it's a mezuzah of tefillin, one section. In this context, mezuzah means a section. What's a section of tefillin? Rashi says, Shema and v'haya'im shamoa. So we'll say, so on Shabbos, if you carry out klaf and duchsustos, you will be chayiv if you carry out enough parchment to be able to write Shema and v'haya'im shamoa. The Gemara says, "V'akarilu l'tefillin mezuzah." Do you call a section of them tefillin a mezuzah? So I'll say, really, is that like a right terminology that you go ahead and you call a parsha of the tefillin a mezuzah? The Gemara says, yes. V'tanya ritzuos tefillin imat tefillin mitamos as hayadayim ifnei atzma. It's supposed to be an interesting halacha over here. The Brisa says that the ritzuos, the straps of tefillin, together with the tefillin, convey tuma to yadayim. So we'll say, so just to understand the context here, look at Rashi. Rashi says, metamos es hayadayim le'inyan truma. So let's remember again, we've seen this concept before. We saw it actually earlier in Shabbos, that halacha l'maisa, Chazal were gozer, that if you touch certain holy items, usually it's in the context of scrolls, but if you touch certain items, your hands become tameh for truma purposes, right? We'll say, actually, remember again, the paradigmatic example of this was if you touch the klaf of a Sefer Torah, so your hands become tameh legabe truma. That if you touch truma, you convey truma to truma. Remember, why did Chazal do this? Chazal did this because, remember, again, we had this, that they used to store truma by Sefer Torah. Because they said, it's a good chap. Why? The truma is kaddish, the Sefer Torah is kaddish. There's only one problem. What ended up happening? Mice got into the Aron Kodesh, started eating the truma, started nibbling on the parchment of the Sefer Torah as well. So Chazal wanted to go ahead and dissuade people from this practice. So what did they do? They said, in fact, if you touch a Sefer Torah and then you touch truma, the truma becomes tameh. That ensures that people will not store truma together with their Sefer Torah. So now the Gemara says something very interesting. Rutzuos tefillin mat tefillin. If you have the straps of your tefillin together with your tefillin, metamos es hayadayim bifnei atzman. So we'll say they have the ability to go ahead and convey tumah to yadayim. I'm sorry, metamos es hayadayim. They convey tumah. Which means if you were to go, it sounds like what it's saying is if you were to touch the straps of your tefillin while they're attached to your tefillin, your hands become tameh for truma purposes. However, bifnei atzman ein metamos es hayadayim. But if the straps are by themselves, then halacha l'maisa, they do not convey tumah ultimately to the hands. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda Omer, Mishon Rabbi Shimon, hanogea b'ritzua tahar ad she'agia b'ktzitza. If one goes ahead and touches the ritzua, touching the ritzuas by themselves, even if they're attached to the tefillin, does not convey tumah to the hands. The only time the hands become tameh is when? Is if mamish you touch the bayis itself. Only if you touch the actual bayis do halacha l'maisa you become tameh. Rabbi Zakkai Mishma Omer, tahar ad sheyiga b'mezuzah atzma. And Rabbi Zakkai says, in fact, by tefillin, you're going to be tahar until what? Until you touch the parsha itself. So I will say, in fact, by tefillin, the only time your hands become tameh for truma purposes, so you won't become tameh if you touch the ritzuas. You won't even become tameh. Your hands don't become tameh if you touch the bayis. Your hands only become tameh when you touch the actual parsha. But I will say, but the point for us is this: what you see that the parsha of a tefillin is called a mezuzah. It's called mezuzah. So therefore, I will say, looping this back, So the Gemara therefore says, the Gemara is assuming that when we said before that for klaf and duchsustros, you're only chayiv if you carry enough out to write the mezuzah. What's a mezuzah? Mezuzah refers to a parsha of tefillin. I v'hamid diktani seifa klaf kedei lichtov alav parsha katana shebetfillin she shema Yisrael. Yet Rabbi say, but the problem is we said at the end of the Mishnah that what, that you're chayiv for klaf if you go ahead and you carry out enough to write a small parsha of tefillin, which is Shema Yisrael and after Michlal, the Reisha b'mezuzah atzma askinan. And Rabbi say, if the Seifa says that you're going to be chayiv if you carry out enough parchment to write a small parsha of tefillin, which is Shema, then it makes sense that when it says mezuzah earlier, that's actually referring to a different kind of mezuzah, a real mezuzah. Hachi katani. Here's what it means. Rabbi say, klaf v'duchsostros b'kama. Rabbi say, now again, what the Gemara is going to suggest is as follows: that perhaps klaf and duchsustros, because they are different types of parchment, we'll call it different types of, meaning we'll say we're going to loosely translate both of them in English as parchment. But at the end of the day, of course, they refer to different types of parchment. Klaf and duchsustros shiurin bekamo, duchsustros kedei lichtov alav mezuzah. So we'll say duchsustros, which remember again Rashi defined as klaf that has had the upper layer removed, upper layer of the parchment removed. So v'duchsustros, you're chayiv if you carry out enough to write a mezuzah. Klaf, and when we say mezuzah, we mean what? Actual mezuzah. Klaf kedei lichtov alav parsha katana shebetfillin shishma Yisrael. Klaf, you'll be chayiv ultimately again if you carry out enough to go ahead and write a small parsha on the tefillin. And what does that refer to? That ultimately refers to Shema Yisrael. So therefore, Rabbi say, the bottom line of the Gemara is as follows: that different types of parchment will have different shiurim. Duchsustros, you're chayiv if you go ahead and you carry out enough of a size of a duchsustros to write on it a mezuzah. Klaf, you're only chayiv if you carry out enough to write on it Shema and V'haya im Shamoa. Or just Shema and V'yahavta, I should say, excuse me. Amarav, so we'll say, Duchsostros, Harike Klaf. So now the Gemara goes right there. Duchsostros is like Klaf. Ma Klaf, kos when I love tefillin. Af Duchsostros, kos when I love tefillin. Just like Klaf, you could write tefillin on it. So to Duchsostros, you could write tefillin on it. So the Gemara says, really? Tanan. I'm sorry, Hari Klaf, Ma Klaf, Kol Tefillin, Tefillin, after Tefillin, Kol Tefillin. Tanan, Klaf, Kadei Lichtov, Parsha Ketana Shebet Tefillin, Shehi Shema Yisrael. Yet we learn in the Mishnah that what? For Klaf, you're chayiv if you go ahead and you carry enough to write the small Parsha Tefillin. And what is that referring to? Shema Yisrael. Rabbi say, what do you see from here? Klaf in Duchsustros lo. Rabbi, you could infer from that halacha l'maisa, it's only Klaf that could be used for Tefillin, Duchsustros cannot. To which the Gemara says, you're right, lemitzvah. What it means is lechatchila, you should use klaf. Rabbi say, klaf is considered to be of a higher quality than duchsustros. So the Gemara says, lechatchila, you really should only use klaf for tefillin, but that's lechatchila, lemitzvah. But b'di'eveh, you could even use duchsustros. Okay, tashma, halacha l'Moshe misinai, tefillin ala klaf, umezuzah al duchsustros. Halacha l'Moshe misinai tells us that tefillin should be written on klaf, but mezuzah could even be written on duchsustros. We'll say, what's the distinction between them? Listen to this. Klaf b'makom basar. So we'll say klaf is the part of the hide that is opposite the flesh. Duchsustros b'makom seyar. On the other hand, duchsustros is the part of the hide which is where the hair was. B'makom basar. Duchsustros b'makom seyar. So the Gemara says, lemitzvah, sima dirabosai, even though we're saying over here that tefillin is on klaf and mezuzah is on duchsustros, but b'di'eved, if you wrote tefillin on duchsustros, you are still yotzei. I v'hatanya, shina pasal. But we learned that if you switch them around, it is pasal. To which the Gemara says, amezuzah. To which the Gemara says, the psul, interestingly enough, is not for tefillin, but rather it's for mezuzah. That if you went ahead and you wrote mezuzah on klaf, that'll be invalid. V'hatanya shina bazeo bozeh pasal. But it says if either you went ahead and you switched either mezuzah or tefillin, it's going to be pasal. Idi v'idi amuzuzah. The truth is, both are talking about mezuzah. V'had kasvinu aklaf b'makom seyar. So as he's talking about, again, we eroded on the klaf, but you use the part of the klaf that is opposite the part where the hair was. Inami abduchsustrus b'makom basar. Or you wrote it under the duchsustrus, but ultimately, again, on the part that faced the flesh. V'baisema, shina bazeh ubazeh tenahi. Or the other possibility is going ahead and deviating by tefillin and by mezuzah is a machlokes. So we'll say, remember again, what we have over here so far is as follows: that halach l'maisa, everyone's agreeing that the ikr din is that the halach l'moshe misinai is that tefillin is on a klaf and mezuzah ultimately again is on duchsostros. The machlokes now comes up apparently if you're going to go ahead and deviate. This sanya shina bazeh ubazeh pasol. If you deviated by tefillin or by mezuzah, it's possible. Rabbi Acha machshir. Rabbi Acha ultimately again says that it's kosher. Mishra Rabbi Achi Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Mishra Rabbi Yaakov Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Papa Rav Kitana de Menashe. The Tana de Menashe. Here we go. Kasva ala niyar va'ala matlis psula. Ala klav va'ala gvil va'ala duchsustus kshera. So we'll say, now watch this. So we'll say, so now you clearly see we have machlokes tanoim. Because remember again, the first opinion said, shina bazeh ubazeh pasel. Whether you changed, whether you deviated by tefillin, so let's say you wrote tefillin on duchsustrus, or you wrote mezuzah on klaf, halach l'maisa, again, that's going to be pasel. That's the first opinion. Rabbi Acha says that it's kosher. Then we quoted a whole variety of opinions. Whose opinion says that you could swap by tefillin and by mezuzah? So watch this. It's Ketana de Bei Menashe. What did Tana de Bei Menashe say? The Tana de Bei Menashe, Kos v'alaniyar v'alamatlis psula. If you wrote, now say we're not sure what you're writing over here, but watch this. If you wrote on niyar, now say now niyar, b'pashtus means paper. Matlis means a cloth. If you wrote on paper or if you wrote on cloth, psula, ala klaf, vala gvil, val duchsustus kshera. But if you wrote on klaf, or if you wrote on gvil, again we'll define these terms, or on duchsustros, it's kshera. So the Gemara says, kas v'mai, what are you writing? When we say if you wrote on cloth or if you wrote on paper, it's going to be pasul. But if you go ahead, if you wrote on klaf, gvil, or duchsustros, it's kshera. What is it that you're writing? So the Gemara says, ilema mezuzah. If you want to say that it's mezuzah, aklaf mikasninon, can you write mezuzah on klaf? We just said before that Allah Lamaisa, the Allah Lamoshe Misina is that mezuzah is written on duchsostros, to which the Gemara says, Ella lav tefillin. Rather, it must mean tefillin. Ula tamech tefillin agavil mikasvinon. Do we write tefillin on gavil? Also remember again, gavil is parchment that has been treated with walnut juice, which is usually what is reserved for Sifrei Torah. So we'll say, so ultimately, again, we just said before, tefillin is written on klaf, not on gavil. To which the Gemara says, Ella, kitanya hi Sefer Torah. You're right, enachinami, again, that's talking about a Sefer Torah. So we'll say, this supports the following. Ki yotzebo, tefillin shebalu, the Sefer Torah shebala. If you have tefillin that have become worn out, or Sefer Torah that has become worn out, ein osin mehen mezuzah. You cannot go ahead and make from it a mezuzah. Why? Lefi she'im moridin mikdusha chamura likdusha kala. So we'll say, interestingly enough, if you have a Sefer Torah or a tefillin that have worn out, you cannot then repurpose it as a mezuzah. Why not? Because Sefer Torah and tefillin have higher kedusha than mezuzah, and you cannot go from a higher level of kedusha to a lower level of kedusha. So interesting enough, the Gemara is saying that the only reason why this is problematic, says the Gemara, is because taima de moridin. Now the only reason apparently why you can't go ahead and repurpose a Sefer Torah or tefillin to a mezuzah is because Sefer Torah and tefillin are of a higher level of kedusha, mezuzahs are on a lower level. Yet interestingly enough, what doesn't the Gemara bring up? The Gemara says ha moridin osin. Now interesting enough, Rabbi say, if this wasn't a problem, you would be able to repurpose it. Now, this is very interesting. Why? The Gemara says, Diksiva amai. Now, both say, now remember, you're telling me that the only reason you can't repurpose a Sefer Torah or tefillin to mezuzah is because Sefer Torah and tefillin is of a higher level, mezuzah is of a lower level, and you can't go from a higher level of kedusha to a lower level of kedusha. But one second, what is the Sefer Torah and Tefillin written on? The Gemara says, Ksiva Amai, Lav de Ksiva Duchsustrus. Is it not written on Duchsustrus? And yet you see, and therefore again, that's why it's saying that halacha lemaisa, you could potentially go ahead and use it for a mezuzah. Lo, the ksiva al klaf. Right? It's written on klaf. It's written on klaf. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Mezuzah klaf mi kasvinan. But we just said before, you can't write a mezuzah on klaf. Right? That mezuzah is written on duchsustrus. The Gemara says, the Gemara says, mezuzah klaf mi kasvinan. Can you write the mezuzah on klaf? Yes, you can. The Gemara says, Vatanya kasva ala klaf. But we just said before that if you wrote it on a klaf, on a matlis, or on a niyar, it's possible. Rabbi Shimon Elazar, Rabbi Meir haya kosva ala klaf, mepnei shemishtameres. So the Gemara Rabbi Shimon Elazar says, Rabbi Meir used to write mezuzah even on a klaf. Why? Because apparently again klaf lasts longer. It's mishtameres. Hashta da ases lahachi. Now that you say this, l'rav nami lo tema duchsustus harik klaf. Don't say that duchsustos is like klaf, rather ema klaf harihu kiduchsustos. Rather say that klaf ultimately again is like duchsustos. Ma duchsustos kos when I love mezuzah, af klaf kos when I love mezuzah. Just like duchsustos, you could write a mezuzah on it. So to klaf, you could write a mezuzah on it as well. So Rabbi say, what turns out over here is really something quite fascinating. So halacha l'maisa, the Gemara understands as follows: the halacha l'Moshe miSinai is that tefillin is written on klaf and mezuzah is written on duchsustus. Sefer Torah is written on gevil. That's the order over here, right? So again, tefillin on klaf, mezuzah on duchsustus, Sefer Torah on gevil. But of course, the halacha is those are the minimum requirements. If one were to go ahead and write any of these items, obviously, again, on a superior form. So, for example, let's say gevil is considered to be the highest level because gevil, interestingly enough, is treated with the me'afatz and the gol nachus. Let's say, if you notice, by the way, parchments of Sifrei Torah look different than the parchments of tefillin and of mezuzahs. There's a certain level of shine that's there. That shine, by the way, has to do with the actual processing of the parchment itself. So again, it's Sefer Torah on gevil, tefillin on klaf, mezuzah on duchsustus. Those are the minimums. But of course, halacha l'maisa, if one wants to go ahead and write any of these items on a higher level item, then halacha l'maisa, again, one would be permitted to do so. We'll say that being said, even if for argument's sake you did, let's say, but again, it's important halacha l'maisa, if you were to even write, let's say, tefillin and mezuzahs, let's say on gevil, which is highest level parchment, halacha l'maisa, you would still not be permitted to repurpose that ultimately again for, so let's say if you were to write tefillin or Sefer Torah on gevil, you would still not be permitted to go ahead and repurpose that for mezuzah, even if it was written on the right type of parchment in the right type of way. Why? Because ultimately, again, repurposing Sifrei Torah or mezuzahs or tefillin for mezuzahs would be considered to be a downgrading of the level of Kedusha, and halacha l'maisa, that is not permitted. All right, Rabbi Yeshikach, we'll stop over here tomorrow, Mirz Hashem. We're going to have later shir as well because Memorial Day. So Mirz Hashem shir will still be at 7:15 a.m. 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. For those who are still utilizing the Zooming in Mirz Hashem, it'll be at 7:15 in the morning again. Wishing everyone a wonderful day, healthy day, wonderful day. Ashikar to everyone for joining us.